Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the Family Monk podcast. So today we're gonna be talking about an issue which most uh, spiritual communities deal with, and this is in regards to the youth. I've titled this episode "Struggles the Youth Face in Spiritual Communities," and it is very important that we discuss these topics because young people in different communities, spiritual communities, go through a lot, and then if the communities are not really careful in looking at those areas where the youth mainly suffer, then there's a big problem. So join me as we dive into these struggles that youth face in the communities, and then also uncover some solutions to those issues. So the first one, the first hurdle most young people face in spiritual communities are, the clash between tradition and modernity. Because most spiritual communities are rooted deeply into old traditions, like things they've learned from the past, and then they're carrying it on. And then the way the world is going right now, it's growing at a very high speed. So most of the young people right now are introduced or exposed to a lot of modern things happening around. So sometimes it becomes very difficult for young people to resonate with, the traditions in spiritual communities, because they might not understand it. It might be something which, they were born or they've grown into, and they still do not understand it because, of the modern exposure they're getting. So that's one of the main issues which young people feel. So I think to bridge this gap, I think the community members or the senior people in the community have to make sure that young people are, educated on the values of the traditions, the importance of the traditions. Because I think it's very important that young people know the reason why they are doing or they are following those traditions. Because when you follow something and you have no idea what it is, what it means, then it has no importance to you. So it's very important that elderly members of the communities or senior devotees in the communities mainly focus on educating the young people, nurturing them, giving them, a taste of those traditions, and then teaching them the importance of those traditions. And then gradually these young people would resonate with that, and then it becomes part of their life. And another significant struggle young people face in spiritual communities is that sense of isolation. Because many spiritual communities, because of in this area, there's a few factors, the reason why young people feel isolated, and this has to do with the first, that the traditions are very old traditions and they cannot resonate with them. So then what happens is that they start feeling isolated because they don't know what to do, they're not sure of what you're doing, and sometimes they get looked at in a different way, which then makes them retreat into their own shells, and then they feel isolated, and this isolation can also lead into a lot of problems like depression, struggles, mental health. So I think it's very important, boiling it back to the first point, to make sure most young people in spiritual communities are aware of the importance of traditions in those spiritual communities. They are given enough education on those ones, and then gradually they would make a choice if this is something they want to do or not. So I think it's very important, because this I've seen most kids, most young people in spiritual communities go through this isolation, and it's not a good space to be in, because as young people, when you feel isolated, then you start questioning yourself. It has a lot of impact on your self-confidence, your self-esteem, and then when young people go through that, they get the issues right. So another issue, you know, in spiritual communities is the feeling of being judged, the feeling of not belonging, first, and also being judged, being looked at differently. And this happens, a lot in spiritual communities, because everybody's expecting you to live up to some expectations. They have expectations of how you should live your life, how you should dress, how you should look, and then young people are full of energy. They want to explore. As I said, they are exposed a lot to a lot of modern stuff. So young people definitely want to explore. They want to try out new things, and this might not be accepted by the members of the community, by the senior members of the community, and it might lead to them being judged, or them looking, the older people looking at the young people in a different way. So this is something which happens quite a lot in spiritual communities, where members of those communities do not really understand. There's a gap between what the young people are trying to see, or are trying to practice, or are exposed to, and then there's the old people who are rooted in a deep old tradition. So this gap creates a lot of friction. It creates a lot of issues for the youth, and it creates a lot of issues for the senior people in the community. So now, how do we solve this judgmental issue? It's very important that senior people in the community sit down with the young people. First of all, they have to understand that young people are full of energy, and then the way the world is growing now, there's a lot of things happening, and the young people would want to explore themselves, and then it's difficult to contain them or to try to regulate what they're doing. So we have to, senior people in the community have to sit down with these young people, and then try to understand them, try to see which direction they want to go. And then as authority figures or as senior people, they can try to guide them, not try to detect for them, but try to guide them, try to let them see things in a different way. Then that judgmentalism would go. Because if we don't sit down with the young people and then try to understand them, the only thing left for us to do is to judge them, to call them, oh, that person is like that, that kid is like that, and which is not a nice thing, nice thing to do in a community. So, lastly, which is very, let's not forget the importance of cultivating self-acceptance and inner strength, encouraging them, to embrace their spiritual path, authentically, and on supporting their journey. Yeah, we have to encourage young people to take spirituality seriously. We have to encourage them, to practice spirituality. We have to teach them the importance of practicing spirituality. We have to create the space where young people feel free to express their spirituality, knowing that their voices would be heard. This is very important, because a lot of young people feel they are not heard. They feel they're being detected too. So if a space is created where young people can express themselves firstly, and then the young people feel heard, I think that is very important for our spiritual communities. Right. So to conclude this episode, let's remember, that challenges there's a lot of challenges young people are facing, and then as communities we have to really sit down and find out what struggles the communities are facing, especially the young people, and then find solutions for those problems. Let me know what challenges you are facing in your community. If you're a young person, let me know what challenges you are facing in your community, and then which community you are situated in. And then we could also find ways to discuss solutions to help you out there. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. It's really been amazing having you, and then watch out for the future episodes. Thank you very much. I'm your host, Maha, and then I'll see you on the next one.